Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LiUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferenc.
A group of senators demanding Amazon address alleged mistreatment of their delivery drivers. Meanwhile, another Wells Fargo branch goes union. And today on the show, the latest from the Ohio Federation of Teachers and California Representative Ro Khanna. Welcome to the Tuesday, January 16th edition of America's Workforce, where we are available on at least 5 platforms. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Melissa Cropper will be our first guest on the show today. She serves as president of the Ohio Federation of Teachers, oh.aft.org. She is also the secretary-treasurer of the Ohio AFL-CIO, and she is going to continue on her mission of organizing, and they're doing a great job in Central Ohio. The Grandview Heights Public Library United Union ratified their first union contract at the end of last month, and this is the second public library system in Central Ohio that has ratified a first union contract. And it comes on the heels of the Pickerington Public Library, another Central Ohio library, overwhelmingly winning their union election in November with 92% voting yes. This is all posted on their website. We're also going to delve into the tone-deaf politicians, not just in the state of Ohio, in a lot of states, but even after Ohioans told politicians last year to leave medical decisions to families and medical providers, well, the lawmakers just aren't listening. We're going to talk about House Bill 68, a bill that passed through the state legislature in mid-December banning gender-affirming care for transgender youth and prohibiting sports participation for trans youth. The OFT, along with many other organizations and thousands of Ohioans, encouraged the governor to veto the bill. And just about a week and a half ago, the governor proposed restrictive rules through Ohio's administrative code that would have serious implications for not only transgender youth, but also for existing parents, including adults. Also, we're going to talk technology. Last week, the AFL-CIO held its 5th annual Labor Innovation and Technology Summit, concurrently with the Consumer Electronics Show convention in Las Vegas. Now, this was intentionally held at the same time as a way to think about how to handle technology and artificial intelligence in the workplace. So we'll touch on all of that and more. Ro Khanna, who we featured on the show maybe about 2 months ago, will be rejoining us today. And he is a representative of California's 17th district. He, too, is going to talk about artificial intelligence and reference a piece that he wrote for the New York Times, where he said our technologies are meant to complement and enhance human initiative, not exploit it. He is of the opinion that we must push for workers to have a decision-making role in how and when to adopt technologies, and we must insist on workers profiting from the implementation of these technologies. That is very, very significant. If you are going to embrace those and make more money, why not share in the wealth? Ro is quoted as saying, "Our generational task is to ensure that AI is a tool for lessening the vast disparities of wealth and opportunity that plague us, not exacerbating them." He's a bright star in Congress, no doubt about that. He represents California's 17th congressional district, which is the Silicon Valley area. He serves right now in his 4th term. He's on the House Armed Services Committee, ranking member of the subcommittees on cyber, innovative technologies, and information systems, co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on India, and Indian Americans, member of the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. He has worked across the aisle to deliver on legislation to invest in science and technology, creating millions of good-paying tech jobs, revitalizing American manufacturing and production. Last time we had him on the show, he talked about his new economic patriotism, and that's his plan to strengthen American manufacturing. I'll tell you, in the first segment, by the way, we recorded this last week when they had the hearings on Hunter Biden, and he had to be called away from the interview to vote on that. It was crazy. You'll hear that later in the show. But he is pro-worker and pro-union, strong supporter of the labor movement, and his push for policies like the PRO Act to ensure that no one with a full-time job needs to rely on food stamps, housing vouchers, or other welfare. He's also one of only a few members of Congress to refuse contributions from PACs and lobbyists. He also supports a 12-year term for members of Congress, 18 years for justices on the Supreme Court. Yeah, I tell you, very far-reaching. And another thing that he's going to talk about is this buyout, this merger with U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel of Japan. They paid a whole lot of money for U.S. Steel, and there are many, including Ro, that feel, you know what, this is an issue of national security. It's not right. And on top of it, you think about the Bipartisan Infrastructure and Jobs Act, where we're pushing for American steel. Now it's Japanese steel. And their collective bargaining is not acceptable if there's any of that on the table right now. So Ro Khanna will be our second guest to wrap up today's show. Now a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. A bipartisan group of 29 senators, including 25 Democrats, 1 independent, and 3 Republicans, have sent a letter to Amazon CEO Andy Jassy probing allegations of mistreatment of delivery drivers. The senators focused on Amazon's Delivery Service Partner Program, which was established in 2018, where entrepreneurs launch independent delivery businesses in partnership with Amazon. Now, the letter highlights concerns that Amazon, while exerting control over drivers' wages and working conditions, avoids legal responsibility through a network of supposedly independent delivery service partners. The senators point to reports suggesting that this system puts a very heavy toll on drivers, often forcing them to work in extreme conditions without appropriate safety measures. They also note possible violations of the Labor Relations Act, including issues related to union recognition, bargaining, and allegations of retaliation against delivery workers involved with union activities. So once again, you're seeing another chip at the block here, the block being Amazon, a giant one at that. Slowly but surely, they're looking into their employment practices. We'll see what happens on this one. It's good that they have a bipartisan group. Wells Fargo employees at a Daytona Beach branch in Florida voted 4-1 to join the Communication Workers of America's Wells Fargo Workers United, making it the second branch to join the union after a location in Albuquerque, New Mexico joined in December. We talked about this on the show last week with Frank Matthews. That was our Tuesday show last week, and it looked like they were going to go, and sure enough, they did. The vote in Daytona Beach adds momentum to the broader campaign to unionize Wells Fargo, the first major U.S. bank facing a union drive. Wells Fargo workers across the country have been advocating for improved wages and working conditions, curbing aggressive sales tactics, and addressing other violations within the bank. A branch in Atwater, California, is scheduled for a vote later this week, this Thursday. And employees there have filed an unfair labor practice claim against Wells Fargo, alleging coercive activities by supervisors. The unfair labor practice is one of 9 now against Wells Fargo at branches and call centers nationwide, with the bank settling 2 of them. A petition for a union vote has also been filed by Wells Fargo employees at a Wilmington, Delaware branch, with the election yet to be scheduled there. So they're on the move. They're on the move, no doubt about that. One more here, and this has to deal with CEO pay, which, as you know, has been outrageous. On average, it's about maybe 350 times that of an average worker. Well, Apple's CEO, Tim Cook, received a pay cut in the company's latest fiscal year following shareholder guidance and a recommendation from Mr. Cook himself. His annual compensation package hit $63.2 million after rising to $99.4 million during the 2022 fiscal year. For the fiscal year ending September 30th, Mr. Cook's target compensation dropped to $49 million, down more than 40% from the 2022 target compensation. As a result, his performance-based stock awards rose to 75%. So his compensation went down, but the stock went up. I don't know if he's going to be able to make it on that. That $49 million. You know, it's tough times with all this inflation today. I don't know. Poor guy. All right, quick break. When we come back, Melissa Cropper on behalf of the Ohio Federation of Teachers.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
It takes LiUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LiUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LiUNA at liuna.org. That's LiUNA.org.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Iron Workers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
America's Workforce Radio is sponsored in part by the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 6, representing painters, glazers, drywall finishers, and sign and display industry workers. They remind you that belonging to a union is your right as an American.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Auto Workers. Find more at uaw.org.
This segment of America's Workforce is brought to you by Survey and Ballot Systems. SBS has been providing unions with secure and flexible election options for over 30 years. Visit surveyandballotsystems.com to learn more.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferenc with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, and that would be AWF Union Podcast. By the way, this next segment brought to you in part by the United Labor Agency. You can find more at ulagency.org. Let's go to Columbus, Ohio right now, join one of our longtime regulars and sponsors. That would be Melissa Cropper on behalf of the Ohio Federation of Teachers. She serves as president, oh.aft.org. Do check out that website. Lots of information posted there, especially about the good year of organizing last year in libraries. But first and foremost, we're going to talk about the legislature in the state of Ohio, which seems to be tone deaf when it comes to what the public wants and what they're getting from their politicians. Melissa, I'm going to turn this over to you, and let's zero in on House Bill 68, which garnered a whole lot of media attention. not just in the state of Ohio, but nationally. And on top of that, I want to talk about what you see this year in the legislature, especially when it comes to vouchers and that kind of thing. But talk to me about 68. Go ahead.
Well, 68, there are two parts of 68, probably more than that, but the two basic parts were that it banned certain types of treatments for children who are considered transgender. It took away the right to parents to make decisions for children on whether to have surgeries or pursue some other type of medication, et cetera. And then it also prevented transgender students from playing on sports teams that were opposite of the sex that they are born with. So did those two things. The governor, you don't always hear me say a lot of great things about the governors. We don't see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. But I really appreciated his approach on this. When the bill came to him, passed through the legislature and came to him, he actually took the time to talk to some doctors, talk to parents and children who had gone through this, and pretty much made the determination that this was parents' rights to choose what types of treatments they had for their children, that it wasn't the place of the legislature or the government to do that. So he vetoed the bill. And then the legislature turned around and on party line votes overrode that veto. And so made it so that transgender parents cannot make the decision to have treatments for their children to transition. So as you said, very tone deaf. We've seen in this state that people very much believe in the rights of individuals to make decisions about their bodies. We saw that in November. We saw that in August when the legislature tried to change our how we do constitutional amendments. I think this is another case where we're talking about what happens to a person's body and who has control over a person's body. And the legislature stepped in and said, we're going to tell you how you handle your body and how you handle your child's body. And it's really, I mean, it's worse than just a shame. It's a travesty, really. It's really a travesty what the legislature is doing right now.
So essentially, we've got politicians calling the shots on what parents should be doing in their own household, correct?
Exactly. The same legislature that screams parents' rights all the time. Parents' rights to choose what books we have in our library. We're going to censor books because we don't like some of these books. So again, I don't even call that parents' rights. It's again catering to a small group of people who want to impose their view of morality on the rest of us here. Mm-hmm. And what really upsets me about this is that what happens to these children in the large scheme of things to the rest of us matters so very little to the rest of us. It's not our lives. It doesn't impact us in any way at all. But to those people who are actually experiencing this, it means a lot. It's impacting their lives. And there's so few. Like when you talk about the sports situation, 6 transgender athletes in the state of Ohio. Out of 1.7 million students, we have 6. And they're spending time in the legislature fighting over these 6 students. But sports is one thing, but what actually happens to these children's bodies? When you hear the stories of these children and what they go through already, the fact that we're spending so much time, the legislature is spending so much time doing something, like I said, that impacts the rest of us in no way at all, but has such a huge, huge impact on these individuals. It's just really sad, and the fact that they're not listening to these individuals and what they have to say. The fact that they've made children's lives, and not just children, there's adults this impacts too, but made the lives of so few people a political football without thinking of the implications that it has on those individuals. It's very, very personal and very, very dangerous, and I think it's something we should all be concerned about. Because we're talking about the rights of individuals to choose over what happens to their own bodies or the bodies of their children.
I didn't realize it was just 6 individuals out of 1.7 million. Wow. What else is on tap in the legislature for this year, Melissa?
Well, right now they're so worried about primaries. The Republicans are having a lot of battles in the primaries that there's not a whole lot happening at the State House. There'll still be some more of this transgender stuff that happens because, like I said, that's the political football they can use for their primary. But beyond that, we're gonna be seeing. We'll have the capital budget this year. So we'll see what they want to do with public funds. We're watching very closely. We saw they expanded vouchers last year. Our concern now in the capital budget is, are they going to now allow public dollars to be used to build private schools or to make enhancements to private schools? So it'll be a further extension of public dollars going for private use. So that will be one big thing we're really watching closely. And then we're still watching what they want to do around Senate Bill 83. That's the higher education bill that's been out there that we've been battling over for a long time. Again, I think nothing will happen before the primaries, but after the primaries are over, it'll be interesting if they try to move that bill again or if they try to attach it to something else that's moving and kind of slide it through, which, of course, we'll all be watching, but we know the kind of tricks that they play there. But the higher ed bill, as we talked about before, is the one that also limits what can be collectively bargained. So it's a huge attack not just on our college professors, on what they teach, but also their ability to be able to bargain their contracts. So we're watching that very, very closely.
We should point out, too, that primary is just 2 months away. It's going to be on March 19th in the state of Ohio. All right, Melissa, we'll keep our eye on that one. Right now, though, let's switch gears and talk about organizing, and the best part is winning a first contract, and we're talking about Grandview Heights Public Library. Talk to me about this one. I'm sure you're pretty excited.
Very excited, very excited. As people who are listening may know, winning an election is incredibly hard, but getting that first contract can sometimes be harder. So every time we get a first contract, it's like a double celebration. In Grandview Heights Public Library, we just got a first contract right around the holiday time, so that they came back to the new year working under a contract. Just is huge for them. It has, extends some parental leave for them, sets up labor management committees, provides some health and safety protections, and provided for a 12% raise through the life of the contract. So again, these are people who have never had a contract before, and we're really pleased that they not only got a first contract, but it was a high-quality first contract. So it wasn't just getting your basics in there and saying, hey, down the road we'll try to fix the rest. They've really got some important protections and some important benefits included in this first contract. So we're very, very excited about that.
And the organizing continues here. Talk to me about Pickerington Public Library. I always have a tough time reading that, but apparently they're going union, right?
Yes, they won their election right before the holiday break. So again, another library. We keep getting more and more interest from libraries, and very excited again to talk about every time we get an election win or a contract in our libraries, because we hope that other librarians, other library workers see that and see what we're able to do for them. So yeah, Pickerington won their election, as did Columbus College of Art and Design. We had 2 union elections right before the holidays. But I can't remember if I've said this on the show before. I probably have because it means so much to me. But I started working in a library when I was a freshman in high school, and did that up until I was a sophomore in college. And then later in my career, I went back and got my library endorsement on my teaching certificate. So I was a school librarian for 14 years before I started this job. So I just get really, really excited when we do the organizing and get first contracts in libraries, because libraries have been such an important part of my life and an important part of my children's lives as they came up through library preschool programs. So as you can see, I get really pumped when we do this work in libraries.
It's been a good year, especially organizing in libraries. It's been a good year for all of labor last year, 2023, and many are saying it's going to continue into this year. In fact, it's happening.
We're still seeing a lot of interest from people wanting to organize, and hopefully we're going to have some more elections coming up very soon. There are a lot of people out there who are seeing the benefits of unions, and it's time for us all to take the bull by the horns and say, join us in this collective battle we're in to make sure that workers have rights.
Absolutely. One more issue here, artificial intelligence. And just about a week ago, the AFL-CIO held their 5th annual Labor Innovation and Technology Summit, which was held at the same time the Consumer Electronics Show was going on in Las Vegas. And this is something that everybody, in fact, Ro Khanna, we're going to talk to him later in the show about this, because he feels if you're going to use artificial intelligence and make more money, well, then the workers should share in the profits. So I'd like to get your take on this, especially in the teaching profession. How's this shaping out?
Well, I very much like that perspective and very much agree with that perspective. We were fortunate to have Secretary of Labor Julie Su join us also for part of our conference. And she made a couple of really good points that are in line with that. One is that as we think about AI and how it's impacting us, we should be thinking about, instead of, we get accused of being scared of technology, accused of trying to shut down technology. What we really are looking at is how do we use the advances in technology to increase productivity so that we can get the same amount of work done in lesser hours for the same or more pay. That improves people's work-life balance. I mean, imagine a world where instead of having to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, we can get the same amount of work done in 25 or 30 hours a week, and we have those extra hours to spend with our family, or to get some sleep so when we are with our families, we have quality time with our families. That's kind of how we're looking at technology and about artificial intelligence. Another thing is how do we push the industry, how do we push those who are using AI to use it to solve some of the real problems that people are facing. So we see AI used a lot now to create wonderful things like better video games or more efficient appliances or things like that. But how do we actually use it to solve some of the problems we have around hunger, housing, et cetera, and force the industry in that way? So again, in education, we're trying to be on the front end and to look at how do things like ChatGPT impact our students. How do we use things like artificial intelligence as a tool to enhance our teaching instead of being replaced? We always want to make sure that the human element isn't taken out of work, especially work like teaching, nursing, and things where just interaction with the public. We always want to keep the human at the center of the work and use artificial intelligence as a way to enhance the work and not replace workers. This particular summit was incredibly interesting because it's co-hosted by SAG-AFTRA. So there was a lot of representation there from SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild and IATSE, because artificial intelligence is certainly having a huge impact in the entertainment industry. I think they're kind of on the forefront of seeing how it can replace workers. Mm-hmm. And hearing from them and learning from them helps us think about what could it possibly do for each of us other labor unions in our sectors, and how do we get on the front end of it, learning from what they've learned.
Lot to consider as we move forward in 2024. Melissa Cropper, president of the Ohio Federation of Teachers, oh.aft.org. Check them out on Facebook at OFT Union, and also on Twitter, or actually X. Okay, we're going to leave it on that note. Melissa, you take care. We'll talk to you next month, okay?
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, quick break. Ro Khanna, representative out of California, coming up next.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferenc.
It takes LiUNA to power North America with affordable energy. The men and women of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, have the skills needed to build and maintain oil, natural gas, nuclear, solar, and wind projects that are shaping America's energy future. From new energy tech to retrofitted facilities, LiUNA members do it all. Find out what it takes to be powered by LiUNA at LiUNA.org. That's LiUNA.org.
Are you an experienced mechanical insulator looking to take your career to the next level? Insulators Local 50 in Central Ohio has steady work for a number of years. Insulators Local 50 offers a total wage and benefits package that can't be beat. It's not just the competitive wages. Local 50 also provides medical, vision, and dental insurance with no paycheck deductions for you and your family. Don't miss out on the chance to secure your future. Join us at Insulators Local 50. Earn great pay and the best benefits. Visit insulators50.com/AWF50 to fill out the online form and a local 50 representative will call to begin the process. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
This portion of the show brought to you by the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craftworkers. For more information, please visit bacweb.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferenc.
And don't forget, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, just sign up, receive our shows on a regular basis, and give us a rating. We always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. Let's go to line number 2, and joining us from Washington right now is a gentleman, a representative of our Congress. We had him on a couple months back. We wanted to talk to him about the latest session of Congress. Ro Khanna is his name, and he's a representative in California's 17th District, which is pretty much the Silicon Valley area. The last time we had him on the show, he was talking about the new economic patriotism plan that he put together. We'll touch on that and see if that's going anywhere. But right now, Ro, welcome back to the show. Happy New Year to you. And I'm just wondering, well, Congress just got back to work, and there's a lot of work to do. I'm just wondering, is this session any different? You've been in Congress for 7 years now. I'm sure you're scratching your head, probably wondering, I don't know if this is the direction I wanted to go in life. But talk to me about it. How you feeling, buddy?
Well, this morning I spent 4 hours in the oversight hearing watching people debate whether Hunter Biden should testify in public or whether he should testify behind closed doors. And every member of Congress felt compelled to give a 5-minute statement of their opinion. And I'm sitting there thinking, is this what the American people sent us for? I mean, don't they want us to figure out how to bring manufacturing back, to create good jobs, to lower their cost of living? And here we are, 4 hours talking about this circus. So days like this, you realize the disconnect between the Beltway and ordinary people.
I'm glad you brought that up because there's a lot of hurt out there. You know, I mean, inflation hit us pretty hard. Things are coming back. We had problems with the supply chain, but the economy, I mean, look at Wall Street. I know Main Street and Wall Street, 2 different things, but there's a lot of good policies that came out of this administration. We talked about that back in November. Unfortunately, that's not helping the president in the polling and all that. But this distraction, what you're talking about here, especially with Hunter Biden, and I promised my listeners, too, I wouldn't talk about Hunter unless he joined a union. that's pretty much how I feel about this because there's too much of that on. Ro, when are we going to get back to talking about the things that Americans are really concerned about?
Well, I don't think people are going to be compelled by the Republican circus. Look, if Hunter Biden was in charge of our economic policy, our national security, then focus on it. But he's got no role in government. I mean, it's a total sideshow. And, you know, what people care about is that it costs too much to pay rent. It costs too much to buy a house these days. You can't get a starter house. We don't have enough high-paying good jobs that we used to have in the before the deindustrialization. We've got all our steel still sitting in China, all the steel that's being made, 9 out of the 16 top steel companies. And now, by the way, it's total absurdity that we're thinking of selling U.S. steel to Nippon Steel. I mean, Nippon, by definition, means Japan Steel. I mean, would Japan ever sell their steel company to American Steel? It's like we never learned. Those are the things we should be talking about, how to build new industry in America, new factories in America, good jobs in America, how to reduce the cost of housing, reduce the cost of child care. Instead, you got the circus.
Ro, that's why you're on this show, because I talk about those very things every day on America's Workforce. And I'm glad you brought up the steel thing, because the Steel Workers Union is one of our big sponsors. In fact, we had Dave McCall on after that announcement.
He's great.
Isn't he a great guy? He's a super guy. And he's very concerned for a number of reasons. And collective bargaining, they're not very union friendly with Nippon Steel.
They're not. And let me just explain very simply. I mean, your callers probably already know this, but the cynicism behind the strategy that's going on. You've got Nippon Steel that is basically going to move all those jobs. They're going to close the blast furnaces in Pennsylvania. They're going to move those jobs down south. So they're not going to have union jobs. And they're probably going to buy the mini mills, which are a certain type of steel, but not the heavy-duty steel that we need for our tanks and for our armored planes. And then they're going to bring that heavy-duty steel in from Japan. And so we're basically allowing a backdoor for them to bring the highest quality steel in from Japan. They'll compete with Cleveland-Cliffs, which is unionized, and to get rid of union jobs. And I'm thinking, how are we even considering this? This is such a no-brainer that it should be shot down. We don't need some committee to tell us we don't need more steel jobs going to Japan.
And especially now with the Bipartisan Infrastructure and Jobs Act, we need steel, and we want American-made steel. That's what we want right now, especially union-made steel. The other part of this, obviously, we got the union issue and collective bargaining, but what about national security? Isn't that important anymore, Ro?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the steel that we need for our armored plates on tanks, on ships, that is stuff we should make here. We shouldn't be getting that from other countries. And what we've done as a country is we've said, okay, we'll do the mini mill steel, and that's some of the steel you can use for non-military equipment, for non-automobile equipment. I mean, the exteriors of automobile need the highest grade steel. And we're fine importing the other steel. And I said, who does that? What country? What other country says, we'll just get steel from somewhere else? And it's really our original sin, in my view, which we hollowed out these communities. You go to Johnstown, you go to Warren, you go downriver Michigan. And I don't blame them for being angry at the country and wanting to just have massive change in Washington. I mean, they got shafted. And when you talk to folks there, they understand what happened. I mean, basically, corporations wanted to make a lot of money, and we wanted the cheapest labor, and we sold out a lot of the industry in this nation.
So talk to me about what can be done about this. I know the shareholders still have to approve it, and I know the steelworkers want hearings, and I know they're going across the aisle, too, Democrats, Republicans. I know there's a lot of concern about this. What's the game plan? What are you hearing right now about this, Ro?
Well, I talked to the Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients, and it's bipartisan. I mean, you've had Chris DeLuzio, you've had John Fetterman. I mean, frankly, you've had J.D. Vance, and people on both sides of the aisle saying, let's not approve this. And there's a committee. It's called a CFIUS committee. It's led by the Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Commerce, and they're looking at this to see whether it would get approved or whether it hurts our national security or whether it hurts American labor. I believe that the president should just come out and say this deal shouldn't go through. I don't think they need to have a whole committee process. I mean, my view is that he's done so much to bring manufacturing back. He gets it. He stood on a picket line. This would be a horrible thing.
So could he do that? Could Biden say this is not going to happen and it won't happen then?
I mean, he technically could. It's not his style, but he could certainly let it be known to his staff and cabinet secretaries that he's very concerned about the deal, and then he could have the committee come out and make the finding. But it's the president has the authority to say this is an international security. And I think for anyone on the fence on this, just think: do you think there's any chance that Japan would allow Cleveland Cliffs or U.S. Steel to buy up Nippon Steel. There's no chance. Right. No way. So why are we doing it? And I mean, and after all this country has been through, after we had Donald Trump and we have Trump coming back, like you would think we would have learned our lesson and not continue to insist on selling out American industry. I mean, you think people would have woken up by now.
Yeah, you would think. And you know, the last time you and I talked, we talked about economic patriotism, the plan to strengthen American manufacturing. Well, this goes right against that. I mean, come on.
It does. I mean, I've got a plan. With David McCall and Lorenzo at Cleveland Cliffs, we're putting out a bill to build new steel plants in Lordstown, in Johnstown, clean steel that could use hydrogen, they could use direct reduction impact. 1/3 of the carbon footprint is China. They bring new jobs, and we're trying that. And then while we're trying that, you're basically selling away all these existing blast furnaces in Pennsylvania, costing thousands of union jobs. I was just livid when I read that.
Ro, I want to switch gears here a little bit. We had Sherrod Brown, Senator Sherrod Brown, on the show last week, and we talked to him about he's a super guy, and we talked about the non-union plants, the auto plants in the South, and he and 32 other senators sent a letter to the CEOs of those plants saying, hey, come on, these workers, they want to join a union. Can you at least stay neutral? I know you're a big labor guy and all that. How do you feel about that moving forward? I think that tactic is, I got to admit, it sounds pretty creative, don't you?
Absolutely, and especially when these auto companies have benefited from your and my tax dollars, right? I mean, they're getting huge funding for these battery plants. They're getting huge funding for electric vehicles. And so we can insist that they should be neutral when it comes to labor. And frankly, we should be insisting that these be good union jobs. If the taxpayer is going to be footing the bill, then we need to know that those jobs that are going to be created are jobs that are going to be able to sustain a family, where someone's going to be able to buy a house, where they're going to be able to have a middle-class life. And you know this, that when UAW, Sean Fain, who's a American hero, when he did what he did and led UAW to get the deal they did with the Big Three, it's not just the UAW wages that went up. Honda's wages went up. Toyota's wages went up. Non-union labor benefits when you have union jobs. And so the biggest thing we can do in this country to tackle some of the wealth inequality is to strengthen labor.
Ro Khanna joining us on our live line. He's a congressional representative of California's 17th District. I'm going to put you on hold real quick. When we come back, I want to talk about artificial intelligence, something we should all be very concerned with. We'll be back right after this on America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce.
It takes LiUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LiUNA. Find out what it takes for LiUNA to keep America running at LiUNA.org. That's LiUNA.org.
The Heat and Frost Insulators and Allied Workers are proud to be a title sponsor for America's Workforce Radio. The Insulators Union is leading the way in the mechanical insulation industry, fire stopping, and infectious disease control. Regarded as North America's energy conservation specialists, these professionals are known for their professional work and dedication. You can learn more about the Insulators Union at insulators.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining, atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at LiUNA.org.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferenc with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. By the way, this next segment brought to you in part by the United Labor Agency, where you can find more at ulagency.org. Let's go back to our live line and rejoin Representative Ro Khanna. Representative Khanna is the representative in California's 17th District, which is in the San Francisco or the Silicon Valley area, which we're taking away in Central Ohio right now. We talked about this in the last show. The Central Ohio with the Intel plant, we've got Google, we got Amazon. We're definitely exploding in Central Ohio. I want to talk about artificial intelligence, though, and I know you did an op-ed recently, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of people very, very concerned, especially the AFL-CIO. If you go to the national website, aflcio.org, they got some facts and figures there. And according to new polling, 70% of workers worry about being replaced by artificial intelligence. But there's more. At the same time, Microsoft, which actually got together with the AFL-CIO recently to talk about this, and their study found workers, 70% of them would delegate as much work as possible to AI to lessen their workloads. So, it's a two-way street. We don't want it to replace jobs. We want it to help workers. Now, Ro, I'd love to. You've got a brilliant background. My gosh, you went to Yale. You taught at Stanford, economics. How do you see this playing out right now?
Well, I think it's a big challenge to make sure that AI is used to help workers, not eliminate jobs. And the piece I wrote in the New York Times tries to make the argument how we should do it. And my point is that there are two ways that you can use AI. One is if the Harvard MBAs get together and they say, okay, figure out how do we lower payroll and how do we eliminate jobs. And that often doesn't end up with a better outcome. Let me give you a concrete example, two concrete examples. How often do you go to the checkout line and you got to do self-checkout and you end up calling someone anyway, and it's the biggest hassle because, half the things don't scan and half the things they don't know the price. Well, right. That's excessive automation. Or how often are you calling and on hold and you're pressing zero because you can't get a customer service rep and you're, fighting with the phone to figure out how you get a human voice. So what we need to do is make sure these tools are used to enhance workers, not to replace them. And what I say is there's got to be a worker committee that is involved in all the decisions of how the technology is going to be used in credentialing, and workers need to share in the profits for the increase in productivity that AI brings.
Now, don't you feel that's a tall order? You know how CEOs are. They want all the money for themselves and their board members, the people at the top. Do you think that there's a possibility of that happening? I guess if enough workers raise their voices. What's your thoughts on that?
I think if workers raise their voices, I think we can regulate it in Congress to say, look, if you're going to be making AI workplace decisions, you need to have a worker representation in those decisions. And ultimately, I think it's good for the company culture, because I don't think just a massive elimination of these jobs it serves the companies. What I analogized, I said, we can't make the same mistakes with AI that we made with globalization. The story, everyone's going to get cheap consumer goods. It's all going to work out. Everyone will get new jobs. Well, how did that turn out? It turned out fine for some of the companies. Turned out fine for the executives. Not so great for a lot of the workers. And I fear with AI, we could make the same mistake if we don't have workers in charge and workers making some profit. One thing that I often talk about is Sears. Sears Roebuck used to give every sales representative, every worker from 1920 until about 1970, some equity in the company. And by 1968, sales representatives at Sears retired with what's the equivalent of $1 million in retirement. Why can't we do that today? We don't give workers any share in the equity, and that's what's led to so much of the wealth disparity.
Well, Ro, I know there's some profit sharing going on in a number of companies. I know in the big three there was some profit sharing, but that's kind of whittled down. Fortunately, they have a new contract here, which is a 4.5-year contract. But let's go back to artificial intelligence, because there was a lot reported on artificial intelligence in 2023. I mean, that tells me a lot of people are concerned. They're very worried about their jobs. The polling indicates that. I'm just wondering, in your opinion, that there's enough discussion on this issue, and I'm just wondering, I can only assume it's going to continue this year until they work something out. How do you feel about this moving forward right now?
Well, I think we need to have regulation by the federal government. We need an AI regulatory agency like we have the FDA for medicine that makes sure that the technology isn't used to spread misinformation, that it's not doing things that could create deep fakes. But the biggest thing, I think, is on the employment side. Workers need to have a seat at the table about AI. And you look at two of the issues of strikes. I mean, one where I was with the Teamsters in my state, and they said, you don't want to have these driverless trucks powered by AI to not have a human on board. And unfortunately, Newsom vetoed the bill, but I'm hoping it'll come back to now. I mean, I don't want to be on a truck without a human. I mean, you want to be on a plane without a human? They have auto flying, et cetera, but we still need human beings. And the other issue was with the writer's strike, where writers insisted that they get compensated in credit and AI just can't go write these scripts. So I think the labor movement is going to have to be very aware, which they are with the AFL-CIO, of AI and making sure they have a voice in it.
Yeah, I want to call attention to the partnership that the AFL-CIO and Microsoft announced. This was in December, and it's a new tech labor partnership on AI and the future of the workforce. We talked with Fred Redmond, who is the Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO on this issue. So it's good to know that a lot of unions are really getting into this. And I know my union, which is now SAG-AFTRA, Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of TV Radio Artists, they were very, very concerned about artificial intelligence when you had somebody that an aspiring actor or actress go into a van, they do all the whatever takes on what they're going to do for a movie or a TV show, and then they capture them on a computer, and then you leave there, and that's it. They own you. They own you. Scary stuff there, but it's got to be worked out. All right, we're going to leave it on that note. I know you're pretty busy over there. Anything else you want to mention here going forward, Ro?
Well, I think the actors and writers example you gave was absolutely right, and they did a fabulous job. They basically got the studio to agree that writers would get compensated, that writers' work couldn't be used by AI without credit. And I think that's a model for labor power, for organizing, to make sure that AI doesn't just become a tool for corporate executives. I mean, technology is a tool. It can be used to improve productivity, improve worker earning, improve workers' lives, or it can be used to enhance the power of executives against workers and to cut payroll and downsize. And I think that the key is going to be that we need legislators saying AI needs to be used in ways that are enhancing workers, and we need labor to be organizing and having power. And the writers' strike was a great example of it. The Teamsters have been a great example of it. We're putting a roundtable together February 15th on AI, the leading academics around the world and several folks from the AFL-CIO. So I'm trying my part to get workers front and center in the conversation.
Well, let's stay on this issue. I love your background. I love what you're doing, and I don't know how you do it sometimes in the halls of Congress, but you're hanging in there. So let's keep in touch on this issue, and especially the new economic patriotism, and hopefully we could tear apart that U.S. Steel merger with Nippon Steel out of Japan.
Your voice matters. I appreciate it. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for giving these issues a platform. Thanks for having me.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up tomorrow, the American Federation of Government Employees. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.